good afternoon, or good morning, wherever you are in the world. Our guest today is Rachel. And Rachel, can you tell us a little to a lot about your background?
Sure.
Because swimming, highly athletic, and much more.
I have a degree in kinesiology and athletic therapy. I studied at the University of Calgary, and then I worked with football and track and field primarily, as well as some hockey teams. Did grow up as a competitive swimmer. After swimming, I ran into some health issues, a little bit of a setback, got into recreational sports, started over time running. Got injured through running, took up yoga as a form of rehabilitation. Ended up getting certified in yoga as an instructor, taught several types of fitness classes, and now I compete as an athlete in fitness and figure competitions. And then I've got a pretty extensive background as a personal trainer and fitness coach.
Yes, and so what she's modestly not telling you is when she swam, she really swam competitively.
Yeah.
She was up in the higher heights. Some of us get in the pool and sink. She didn't just float, she swam.
I did so.
I'm only jealous of people who can swim well, because I look at me and I look at them and I look at me and I go, not my gift. But I have a lot of fun.
Right,
so,
that's the most important.
And it helps me with my fitness, and it really important to me is cardio and cardiovascular fitness. I figure if I have that underway, other things can follow. But if I don't have that,
yes, well, swimming is actually one of the best cardiovascular sports for you.
And it's pain-free.
That's right.
Except for the days I forget my goggles and I lose my count on my strokes with my eyes closed. And only twice in 10 years, but I bumped into the end at full stream. Ouch!
Yeah, that's not
Didn't say I was the brightest bulb in the package. So you were sharing, when we first met, about your health story and choices made. And you had the courage to share that, and people who've heard my story about fighting cancer and with deep respect but angst, firing my mental health team because they didn't have any skills to teach me. And I was like, well, then why are you here?
Right.
So you had a different and similar, where you got help, but eventually you stalled in recuperation because their traditional model didn't help.
Yeah, what exactly would you like me to share?
Well, you were a competitive swimmer, and then you ran into a health issue.
Yeah, so I competitive swam for about 15, 16 years, and I had the goal of competing in the Olympics. That was my athletic endeavor that I was on a mission to accomplish. And for the most part, things were on track and were going pretty well. I mean, with any sports, there's a lot of politics, and you have to qualify and meet certain standards, and that's just part of the process. But for me, I loved doing it because it was really fun and it was something that I was so passionate about. But so a typical day for us, we would train twice a day, first thing in the morning and then after school. So my life.
Define first thing in the morning.
We'd be in the water by 5:30 in the morning.
Some of my friends think that first thing in the morning is 9-ish.
It's 9-ish.
And I go, I'm a 6:15, 6:20 kind of guy, but I have swimmers and friends, and 5 in the morning in the pool. Just like some of my friends that do hockey.
Right.
4 or 5 in the morning, they're on the rink to practice.
Right. Yeah.
So yes, sorry to interrupt, but
that's okay.
Because that's part of the discipline, and part of being resilient is what's your discipline and in what areas.
Right.
So it's a really valuable point.
Yeah. Well, so then the day actually starts at 4:30 because you're up before that, and I traveled about 40-45 minutes to swim with the team that I swam with. So we'd be in the water at 5:30. You'd swim for an hour and a half or 2 hours. I'd go to school and go right back to the pool after school, train for another hour and a half to 2 hours, and then go home and do homework and eat dinner and go to bed, and it would repeat over again. So that's twice a day, 5 days a week, and then we would train usually 3 to 4 hours on the weekends if we weren't competing.
So just to clarify, how long a pool was this?
This was, well, at the time when I first started, I was in a smaller pool because the town that I lived in, we didn't have a regulation-sized Olympic swimming pool. So we swam in a 20-yard pool, which meant that you were doing that many more laps and flip turns.
Yes. Lots of practice on the flip turn.
Lots of practice on the flip turn.
And a flip turn is when you come up to the edge of the pool and you turn around underwater.
That's right. Yeah.
And go back again.
That's right. Yeah, so you don't actually touch with your hand, you're just completing a somersault essentially and then pushing your feet off the wall so that you're keeping that momentum continuous.
Sorry, those of us that get a little dizzy underwater by moving up and down, I can only imagine. And he drowned in the end.
Yeah. But eventually, the team that I transitioned over to, they had built a new fitness facility on a military base. and we swim in a 25-meter pool. That's a regulation standard pool. Again, depending on the competitions that you go to, there's also 50-meter pools as well.
Oh, okay. So how many 25-meter lengths did you do?
Well, we would average anywhere, depending on what the goal was for that practice, between 200 and 400 lengths in a practice.
So do your math.
Twice a day.
25 meters, 200 to
400
lengths. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Do I think I hear a kilometer or two in there?
Yeah, definitely.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, because again, part of resiliency and mastery is practice.
That's right.
And having a coach and being open to being coached. I've been coached enough that I can swim adequately now.
Right.
But for the first few years, swimming was a lot of work and it was a lot of annoyance. So jump in, thrash around, get out refreshed.
Right.
But now it's soothing because I actually, not being good at it, but
You enjoy it.
I now enjoy it.
Yeah.
I can't do the surface well, but about 6 to 12 inches, 2 feet below seems to be my buoyancy level. And
Just perfect for you.
I can do 20 lengths now and it's just enjoyable.
That's great.
Yes, but I'll never challenge you to a swim off.
Yeah. So we swam twice a day, 5 days a week, and then longer practices on the weekends if we weren't competing. Did this for several years, and it was in my, I guess, halfway through high school or towards the end of high school. I went to a swim practice, and I went from being able to complete practices with no problems. Obviously, they're challenging because they're supposed to be. But from completing, anywhere from 200 to 400 lengths to I could barely finish 2 lengths without being out of breath and feeling like there was a big, literally like a big rock on my chest. Like it was just so hard to breathe. I couldn't figure out what was wrong. So I kind of struggled my way through practice. I talked about it with my coach afterwards, and to make a long story short, I figured okay, well maybe it's because what's really common for swimmers is to develop what they call exercise-induced asthma, because you're exposed to the toxins and chemicals, unfortunately, that are in a pool to kill off all the bacteria, and so it's a pretty common issue. So initially I was sent to the doctor thinking that was probably the problem.
Right.
So they did prescribe bronchodilators that seemed to somewhat alleviate, but to be honest with you, looking back on it now, I think it was more a psychological thing, that it's like someone says, here, take this magic pill, it's going to do X, Y, and Z for you.
Placebo effect.
And you're like, all right, awesome, and then all of a sudden everything changes, and you're like, yeah, that really is a magic pill. But if the science behind it doesn't actually prove that that's what's there, like, actually, we just gave you Advil, then, you kind of know what's happening. So I think it was more a psychological thing for me for the first bit, like, oh yeah, for sure, these puffers really are working. And then it reached a point where it's like, no, this isn't really changing anything. And it was other things that started to change for me. I was becoming a lot more fatigued throughout the day. It wasn't just not being able to complete lengths in the pool. It was like going up a flight of stairs at school, going for a walk around the block, all of our dry land conditioning that we would do as well. It was a struggle for me to get through.
And that's a serious message to yourself that something's not right.
Yeah.
Because it's one thing to have problems in the pool with asthma, but if you can't walk up a flight of stairs and you were in what I would suggest was premium athlete shape. Definitely. So it started to become more of an issue and a concern, and so then it was like going for a battery of tests. I worked through my regular medical doctor at the time, and test after test, things were coming back positive. And then it was my coach that actually said, you know what, I've got a really great friend that I think you should see. He's a doctor, and it happened to be one of my teammates' dads. So we went, and he was like, you know what, we should do some exercise tests, actually. Like, we should probably have a look at an ECG, what's going on with what's happening cardiovascular in your body. And so one of the first things they did was an ECG. So they place a bunch of electrodes on you, and they're basically monitoring the activity of your heart. And then they do what's called, they're able from that to do an ejection fraction, which basically measures the strength of your heart muscle and how much blood is actually being pushed and pumped out by the heart in each beat. So they performed a series of tests, and I remember I was getting ready to go to swim practice one day, and my mom called me at school and said, we're actually not going to swim practice, I'm going to come and pick you up, we have to go see the doctor. And she didn't tell me
why it was that we needed to go see the doctor. But when I found out later, she was actually called by our physician, and he had said, don't let Rachel go to practice tonight because there's something severely wrong, and if she gets in the pool, it could end up in a fatal situation. So obviously really alarming for my mom, and trying to keep her composure and her cool. It was made for a really interesting car ride.
I bet.
On the way to the doctor's office. And yeah, I remember walking in and sitting down, and then basically, I mean, I knew this doctor through obviously being the father of one of my teammates. But I didn't know him super, super well, in the sense that he hadn't been my physician, you know, growing up since I was younger. And so I could tell that there was something really difficult for him to have to say. And he kind of just looked at me and said, I don't really know how to tell you this, but you have a heart condition that is fatal if you get in the pool. We don't know how you got it or why you got it, but what's happening right now, according to these tests, is that your heart muscle is actually significantly weaker than it should be, particularly for somebody of your athletic ability and your age.
And practice intensity.
Yeah.
Because I had high school friends, two of them. One smoked 2 to 3 packs a day. One didn't, and did all the right things, and yet this one had the ability to do incredible things more than this one, and yet nobody could beat the guy that didn't smoke, didn't drink, and yet the guy that smoked. So there is some ability that helps, but practice also makes a big difference.
Yeah, absolutely.
So as a kid, I was pretty in awe that he smokes and he's still better than all of us. But that was natural talent. Imagine where he'd been if he
hadn't had
practiced more than that 10 minutes a day.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm still jealous.
Yeah.
If he didn't smoke, he could have been, because he did regional all the time.
Right.
It was boring. Athletics then was boring.
Yeah, it wasn't stimulating for him.
Too bad.
Maybe that's why he resorted to the other.
Oh, and he did.
He needed some other excitement in his life.
So this doctor broke this bad news.
The doctor broke the bad news, and I remember just like, it was such an unreal experience. I mean, my mom was a mess, obviously.
Well, yeah, as a parent,
most parents would be.
having your, you know, on the way to being adult child, because you were over 16, but you weren't 25.
That's right.
It's like, but she's just getting started.
And yeah, and I mean, it was actually, I was at a point where I was in a comeback phase. I'd taken a small break from swimming, because when you make that goal for yourself of like, okay, I really am going to compete at such a world-class level, you have to, I was so fortunate to have such amazing coaches in my life that were like, you know, they had the capability of really helping get athletes there and put you in front of the right people if they couldn't. But it was a point for me where I had to ask myself, am I willing to give up everything? My social life, my school schedule is going to be built around this. The type of university that I go to is going to be built around this. So I did take a short period of time away from the sport so that I could see what it was like, because I had been in it since I was 8 years old, and had decided, no, this is really what I want to do. So,
well, you took what I would say reflective time.
Exactly. Yep, definitely. I mean, I was still athletic, I was still training, it just wasn't to the same intensity, and you're giving yourself a bit of a mental break so that, yeah, you could really think about, is this something
I really want?
That's right. So I remember sitting there kind of being like, it was almost like, it was very surreal, you know, because I think like I'd never really experienced, never broken any bones. I'd never had any other major health issues that had prevented me from moving forward in anything.
Right.
So this was my first real experience, and somebody was just telling me this, you know, and so it was like the words coming out of somebody's mouth, and then you hearing it, but it not really registering yet as to this is what's happening. But so I don't think that it really hit me in the doctor's office. Like, I had two people very emotional, and then from there it was kind of like, well, we need to figure out what's next for you, because we need to know, like, you're going to have to go on medication. The first steps first, you're going to have to go on heart rate monitors. You can't go back to the pool. Well, it was like, okay, after a couple of days of not being able to go back to the pool, where things started to really hit me more emotionally.
Because exercise of any sort is both a wonderful stress reliever, but it also has its own joys.
And it's the routine too, right? I mean, I had something literally taken away from me. So now, I mean, what I love so much about, growing up and being essentially codependent on a parent driving you to practice all the time until you got your own license, and they were like, thank you, go, just be really safe. Although I know that it didn't do her any justice sleeping wise, because they still worry about you being on the road.
Yeah.
But, I was very blessed. My mom always said to me, if this is something you want to do, listen, I'll support you 150%. I'll drive you to those practices, but it's you that has to set that alarm and get up. If you're not getting up, I'm not getting up. So unless you come to wake me up, I'm sorry.
Well,
and it really, it was amazing. I mean, there were several times where I do remember over the course of my time missing a practice because I said, no, I just want to sleep. And she said, okay, just remember. And then, the alarm would go off and it would be 7:30 and it'd be like, I didn't go to practice. Why did you not let me go? And like, no, exactly. This is your choice.
Sounds like a very wise mother.
Yeah. So it was that missing that routine, but also when you grow up as an athlete, that becomes your family as well. And I really was mentored and coached on not just how to be an athlete in the pool, but your discipline, your determination. There were so many things that helped shape who I am today.
That's why sports is such a valuable tool to help us all grow in life, and especially when we're young.
Yeah. And for me, I didn't know it at the time, necessarily in that moment, but being physical through any sport became an outlet of me being able to relieve stress. And so not having that there was something where it just like everything kind of seemed to, really boil up. And at the time, I wasn't a good communicator, so... No.
Teenager's not a good communicator. Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I think it was really hard in a lot of respects because I was trying to come to terms with what I'd been told and face the fact that it was literally like, this will not happen for you. And then, having parents trying to support you through something that you're going through, but you not being able to really fully articulate, or you feel like, but you don't get this, like I'm tired going for a walk outside, and then there's all the physical components that, start to play on you, where, I mean, obviously I was, at a certain age where you do need to be physical in order to maintain that type of fitness level, and I mean, every athlete goes through it. When you leave your sport, you're not going to be in the same physical shape, but for me, so it was definitely a very emotional thing to have to see yourself physically change as well. So not only could I not go and compete in the pool, but now I'm starting to really physically see a difference in my body, and that didn't make me feel good either. So I was struggling with a lot of different things, and then I'm a firm believer that, medication, not all medication, but just like medication in general can have a lot of physiological effects on your body as well, and some of those are weight gain. Not necessarily to say that that's what was happening with the medication that I was on, but I think it was more or less to do with me just not being active to the same intensity.
I've only been up to 5,000 calories a day. I was not in training, but I was working 2 summer jobs to pay for school.
Right.
And I remember going to see an athletic coach because it was just, I like to explore. And he looked at my caloric intake and said, what are you doing? Because he got me to chart. Before you come to see me, here.
Food diary. Yeah.
And he went, 4,800 calories a day. What do you weigh? And I told him, he said, well, you're a little underweight, if anything.
Yeah.
I said, well, I've got this 40-hour-a-week job, and I've got a 32-hour-a-week job, and then for fun, I teach piano Tuesday and Wednesday nights. And then sometimes I go over and I work at the gas station. But why? I said, I don't want to have any debts when I leave college.
Yeah.
Oh. He said, I'm just here because I'm exploring. I have a chronic health issue back then. And so I just want to see what your thoughts were.
Yeah.
And he said, when you quit all this intensity of work, I'm just concerned you're going to gain a lot of weight.
Right.
So I managed to, when I went back to school and went back to one job, I managed to
cut everything.
I didn't gain the usual, they talk about you go to
Freshman 15.
Freshman 15, no. I think I gained 3 or 4 every September when I went back, and then by December I'd get it down a couple.
Yeah.
But I must admit that over Christmas, I'd gain it back in January, was back to try to lose it again.
Yes.
But, you know, and that was just at a little bit. I wasn't even at 20% of your intensity. I can't imagine.
Yeah. Yeah, so, I mean, and as a female, not to put the onus just on females, but I think, I mean, I was in a body image sport, so, I mean, you're wearing a very tiny bathing suit, and you're used to being okay with that, and all of a sudden, yeah, things start to change, and then you see things in magazines that are expecting you to be a certain way, or at least that's how you perceive it, and so, not only was I dealing with this heart issue, which involved, you know, several trips to the Ottawa Heart Institute, and going on medication and regular tests. You're very familiar with it, being poked and prodded all the time. You're just like, okay.
So that led to big stuff, big issues.
Yeah, it did, and I think, you know, it's something that, I mean, everything in life is a choice, and I really do believe that.
It's a powerful statement.
It is.
About being resilient. You know that.
Yes, definitely. And you know, I think that there are pieces of me that knew that at the time. But like anything, when you're going through a physical setback or a challenge or a barrier, an obstacle, however you want to define it, obviously, you know, people around you that love you and care about you want what's best for you. Right. And they're often the first ones that can see how it's dramatically affecting your life. And so I had, obviously, my family that was concerned for me, and I don't necessarily think that everybody initially knew the effects that it was having on me with regards to my eating habits. But there were people like my mom that were most close to me that definitely did, and tried to very, you know, non-invasively offer support and encourage and make gestures in a way that was like, do you realize what you're doing to yourself? And obviously being in a education system where I was studying nutrition and the importance of it, and I'll be honest, it's a topic that you discuss as part of the nutritional component of it, and it's just one of those things that when you make a decision, you do it, and I can't really explain exactly, you know, what made me do it, other than for some reason, you know, embodying that type of behavior, it just made me feel like I was in control. And
yeah, I can't judge it. I think it's important to acknowledge.
Yeah, it's you know, so I'm able to look back on it now and see it was over the course of several years that this was happening, and it just became very more apparent when I had this ability to no longer be able to compete like I had been, and so it took one day where I was in my I was in my last year of university, and I looked in the mirror and I actually saw who other people were seeing. And at that point I was probably at such a state that I should have been hospitalized. I was very, very ill. I mean, my hair was falling out. I had yellow teeth. It was just like all of these things that you think like, I'm pretty and this is exactly what people, you know, like, and so it become a real, you know, without swearing, it really becomes a mind issue, because the more that you continue to engage in that type of behavior, it starts to become a habit. And so even when you reach that point where you're like, you know what, there's something wrong with me, I should probably do something about this, it's like, well, now you've created a piece of your lifestyle that's now a routine, and this is just the normal everyday thing.
And routines.
And you have to, yeah. And of course, like, there's two courses in life. You can take the path of least resistance, which is most comfortable for everyone, or you can take the path where you're going to be challenged and you have to overcome those challenges, and I wasn't ready to take it. I wasn't ready to take it until I looked in the mirror and was like, wow, there's something significantly wrong here. And I had been to rehab several times, well, on several attempted times. People had gone with me, I had gone by myself, my doctors knew about it, and despite all of the other health issues that were going on in my life, it never really clicked for me, and, you know, in terms of like, well, yes, you have this heart issue, but do you realize that like things have been triggered along the way that could have, you know, been a part of that, but then also you're not helping your body now by continuing to engage in these. When I was diagnosed with that heart condition, it was probably about 6 to 8 months later where I made the decision for myself. I was like, you know what, if I was to die tomorrow, I wouldn't die happy. So despite what I'm being told, I'm going to go and do the types of physical training that I want to do. And I remember my mom freaking out, of course, because I'm sure as a parent, I'm not a parent, so I can't really speak to the experience, but I'm sure as a parent, you think of the worst situation, the worst possible outcome. You've just been told this by the doctor. If you exercise to a certain extent, then this could be what you're faced with. But for me, it was like I was miserable. I was not loving the life that I was living. I missed being in sports. It was actually more frustrating for me to go and only be able to be like, oh, I can only get my heart rate to, oh, I'm already there. I can't do this. You know, it just became one of those things where I started to really self-doubt, and I wasn't enjoying. I was becoming more stressed not being able to do it, or only be able to do it to a certain extent, knowing that like, well, if I just pushed a little harder, it would feel like this. So that's when I started taking up running recreationally. And it was kind of comforting in some respects because there is a type of running where it's a great way to control your heart rate and what's happening with your heart rate. But then I started becoming addicted to running. So, I'm
not laughing at you.
No, that's okay.
Life yo-yos. And we have to be careful to try to stay in that middle third.
That's right.
Because extremes on both ends are dangerous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was one of those things that I'd never grown up as a runner. I mean, we did it as part of our conditioning and training for swimming, but it was like hill running and things that were more anaerobic as opposed to endurance. And what I started to get into is like, oh, I could do 2 kilometers, and then I could do 3, and then I was up to 5, and then it was all of a sudden I was running like half marathon distances. And
yes, somewhere after 3 kilometers you'd lose me.
Yeah.
You get rollerblade 20 miles or 20 kilometers. Easy.
No problem.
Oh, right. You want to be competitively athletic. I just want to have fun.
Yeah, and so that in combination with like the food was like the perfect thing for me. It was like I had everything. It was the best of both worlds. Well, it was when I finally decided to compete in my first half marathon. The training was going great, and then I had to pull out because I developed IT band syndrome. And IT band syndrome is basically there's a long band of fascia that connects from the top of your hip all the way down to your shin bone. And it can get very tight. It surpasses your knee joint, and it gets really tight if you don't stretch it properly and take care of it, but also from constant repetitive use. And so when we talk about, you know, doing the amount of running that I was doing, I wasn't doing running the right way for the right reasons. It's not like I was running with a track team and a cross-country team where, you know, every workout was designed a certain way. For me, it was a way for me to control my health issues, right? So that pulled me out, and that was frustrating because then IT band syndrome, if it gets to a point where it's so severe, it's painful just to walk. So you literally have to stop running. So that's what happened to me. After that healed, I got back into running again and started training for some more races, and I fractured my foot. So again, long story short, it just was like one thing after another. I've actually broken both feet now, and it's all because of how I treated my body.
Right.
So
it was a machine at that point to control.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, something when you unfortunately, I mean, like, fortunately, I'm still here today, so thank God for that. But there's other people that go through it and they're not so fortunate. But that is the nature of a disease like that. You don't realize it at the time. You think that you're doing something good for your body because that's what you start to create for yourself, the story that you create for yourself. But what happened to me is that I wasn't seeing the effects of it immediately, but I saw them more long term. So, yeah, it was, I mean, it took me out of running altogether, and then that was the end of running. And, yeah, slowly I started to gain some more confidence in terms of, okay, it's time to get myself back into being healthier. still dealing with the whole heart issue. Once I started to develop better healthy eating habits and was more open with a counselor about these issues, things started to improve a little bit. But it would be, yeah, it would be like every...
Being open to counseling and coaching,
yeah.
big resiliency factor.
Yeah.
Just in case you haven't got that point already.
You know what? It was not easy. It was not easy because the first thing is that for me, I had to give myself permission. I had to give myself permission to go in and talk to a complete stranger, and despite all of the stories or opinions that you hear about counselors or shrinks or whatever you want to call them, you formulate your own opinion, and then of course we're always our own worst critic. So, and you know what, when you're sharing something, a piece of you like that, it's hard to say because you automatically are concerned not about your story, but what are other people going to think about you. And at that point, I mean, it shouldn't have mattered, but it did.
Well, but that's being human. Mm-hmm. And it's an impediment to growing if we can't get by it, but it's normal to feel that way. Yeah.
And then along with part of like giving yourself permission to share your story to somebody, you have to be open to being vulnerable. It's just what comes with it. So it was, yeah, I mean, several attempts to even get out any little pieces of the story because I would just start to talk about it and be like, I can't do this, you know? I was like, okay, your next session is, you know, and you'd be given homework and things like that to go away with. And so I finally started making some progress, but it seemed to be one of those situations where for every kind of like 5 or 6 steps forward, I would take 3 or 4 back.
Well, this had become, as you said, a habit.
A habit.
A lifestyle. So, for argument's sake, there was 100 components of it to break. Now, if you'd done them for months and months, they were a habit.
Yeah. Yeah.
This isn't like my ice cream habit that's only 1 container a month. This is true confessions.
Right.
Because 1 container a month, that's my habit, and I don't care. But for a little while in life, when there was pain, instead of alcohol, I chose ice cream.
Yeah.
Luckily, I didn't balloon up, but it was like, I just ate 3 tubs of ice cream in 6 days. I think I should slow down.
Yeah.
That was a tiny habit,
Yeah.
because I love chocolate.
Yeah.
But that's a very light comment of yours, because yours was deep and big and wide and long term.
It was years. It was years, and so, but what? So as I was making small gains over time, I started to notice different things changing, started feeling more energy, of course.
Yes.
You're eating food, surprise.
Yeah, you're putting in more fuel.
Yeah. But what really set it off was that when I was probably at one of my healthiest points in my rehabilitation process, I had to go back for another series of heart tests. And they did this ejection fraction, and I can't remember the exact percentage. I want to say 50%, 50 to 55%, 50 to 60% is a typical ejection fraction. Don't quote me on it though. But I was so low, I was down around like the 20, under 20 at one point. So that was like a big concern. Well, this time the ejection fraction was up closer to 50. And so they were very impressed at the point where they said, you know what? You could probably go off of your medication at this point. You're that close. We don't know. Again, we don't know what caused this. And we don't know what's changing it, you know, but let's not question it because for whatever reason, you're going in the right direction now. And that's what's more of an exciting piece. And so once I heard that, it was kind of like, wow, okay, what else in my life is changing? And so taking a look at the other components of my lifestyle that had actually probably been contributing to that.
You were in school at this point still?
I was still in university.
Did you find studying starting to get easier?
Yeah, absolutely.
More fuel for the brain.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. Well, yeah, I didn't have to take as many afternoon naps.
Hey, wait a minute. At a certain age, I like my... yeah, okay.
Well, you know what? Life just started to become more enjoyable. I started to become more of an enjoyable person to be around. Like,
personality changes.
Yeah, yeah, because let's face it, when you are not eating, you're irritable. I mean, like, you're bitchy, and I wasn't happy. I wasn't happy, period. And if you're not happy with yourself, it's really hard to be happy
No,
around
and if
other
you're not
people.
getting the fuel for the brain, then it's hard to be happy because you're running on fumes or an empty tank.
Yeah.
It really affects personality.
It did. I mean, I was also throughout university, I was in a more serious relationship, and so it definitely had its toll. It had a big time toll on that. There are lots of other things I'm sure that were affected in that, but I mean, it's definitely something that's a piece of it. So it doesn't just affect what I learned and what I've learned now. It doesn't, an issue like that doesn't, your choices don't just affect who you are, they affect all the people around you in your life.
Absolutely.
And
it builds or tears at your support team, which is a big factor for how we heal.
yeah. So I think to kind of sum it up a little bit, it's an issue that I will always be aware of. It's something that I'll always have to, quote unquote, deal with, in the sense that I will not deny the fact that when something is that predominant in your life, there are times where, I mean, I'm in a sport now where it's, again, it's about body image and it's very physical. And so it's hard sometimes to see yourself going through changes and not be tempted to go back to where you were before. But
that would be a shortcut.
That would be a shortcut. It would be a Band-Aid fix. And what I'm into now is, after continuing to study health and fitness and become certified, but not even just that, I'm more of a global fitness ambassador. Like, I've had the opportunity to do lots of traveling around the world teaching fitness, and that is truly what I love to do. And I have to make the commitment to myself that if I'm not willing to walk the walk and talk the talk, then who am I to coach anybody?
Right.
I'm not being the advocate for health and fitness that I'm preaching that I am. And so last year I turned 30, and I said to myself, I'd always wanted to compete in fitness and figure, and I said, I am going to step on the stage this year because these are for the right reason. I'm ready to do this.
Yes, the right
I'm in a
reasons,
better,
yes.
I'm in a better health place, and I'm doing it not because of what other people think of me and because I have something to prove to somebody, but because I know I can do it, and I've always wanted to do it, and I'm ready to do it. So I sourced out some really great coaches, and I started training with them in March of last year. And I also made the commitment to myself that if I felt that the sport was taking over me in such a way that it was going back to where I was before, I had to pull myself out.
So to go to the resiliency model, you were self-advocating by finding the right coaches, and you were looking at a new type of mastery, and you were doing something that's very important. You were practicing self-awareness.
Yeah.
Here's the old habits, here's the new habits. These habits served me badly and hurt my health and relationships. These habits can help me build and nurture a career, a new lifestyle, and be joyful, where this wasn't happiness.
Yeah.
So that's really important, because it's the self-awareness. A lot of people are not self-aware. They just blindly let their habits and their unconscious choices drive them.
Yeah.
And so I'm hearing that you were making conscious choices on purpose, and that's really vital.
Yeah. Well, and I think I was just at that place where, I mean, when you're an expert in your field, it's really easy to think, like, I can do this all by myself, and that's definitely the mentality that I adopted through all of this. You know, I wouldn't let anybody in. I wouldn't communicate about any of these things that were going on. Everyone else could tell what was happening, but I would never own up to the fact or have a conversation unless it was with people that I was, in rehab with. And I mean, obviously I was having to have that conversation, and that's what their profession and their job as a coach is for you. And so now I was very much in this place of, okay, I'm taking ownership for what's happened in the past, and I can't change it.
No.
But I can own it in such a way that once I declared that that was something that I physically chose to do to myself, I became more powerful. And so I sourced out some really phenomenal coaches, and I was basically asking for help. I'd never stepped on stage before. This is a totally different type of training than I had ever done. And life is not about having to do it all alone. No. The wider and the deeper the team, and the more the commitment to each other, the more amazing it gets. And it's like that saying that a joy shared is doubled, and a trouble shared is halved. Yeah.
Well, when we have a good coach and team, or coaches and teams,
Yeah.
because no one coach can do our whole life for us, it makes the process a little easier. It gets rid of some of the lumps and the bumps on the journey.
Yeah.
Yeah, good for you.
Yeah.
Well, that's really a long journey.
Oh, but awesome. I have to say that I feel like the first time I stepped on stage was in May of last year.
Okay.
And I did very well. I had a phenomenal second place finish, and for a first show it was great. And they say that once you do one show, you're either going to love it and you'll develop the bug and you'll be addicted to it. Or it might be enough to say like, hey, that's great, I can add it to my resume and it was a great experience, but you know what, not for me. And I was definitely one of those ones that loved it. It was something that took me out of my comfort zone. But I have to say, Michael, that the thing that changed for me is that issue with the eating disorder that I had strived for so many years to look a certain way by manipulating food and depriving myself of food, I was now on the opposite end of the spectrum in the sense that I was eating so much. I'd eaten more than I'd ever eaten my entire life and felt amazing, but I had achieved the physique that I would always wanted.
But you're eating well.
Yes.
Yes. Rachel knows I do a little bit of coaching, and people know I'm not a nutritional expert, but I always say get an expert.
Yeah.
But I always advocate if you're not eating real well, 19 meals a week minimum, because I believe that one junky meal a week that won't hurt you, organic nachos with cheese, maybe not the wisest meal choice once a week, but if it's only once or twice a week, I'm not going to criticize.
Yeah.
But when I get a client that's 150 pounds overweight, they need to see a dietitian.
Yes.
They need to see they need to go to their doctor and get a physical. They need to see why.
Yeah.
And I'm amazed at how many people just went, wow, it just sort of crept up on me over 10 years.
Yeah.
But all of a sudden they think that I've got the answers. Like, no, I'm going to work you hard, but I'm going to send you off to a dietitian.
Yeah.
Your doctor. You need a fitness coach.
Yeah.
That's not me.
Yeah.
I'm just going to get you started, and then probably it's best you stop seeing me and you go see them and work with them. So for your courage to be self-aware, make a choice, own it. Owning it is enormous.
Yeah.
And we live in a society that, but don't you want to play your victim card for just a few more years?
It's true. It's true. But yeah, so it's, and that's, I have to say that first 4 to 5 weeks of working with my coaches, because at the time I was also vegetarian. And so, and the only time that I really ever ate somewhat of a meat source was fish. And
so you've had quite a journey, and what I've heard is owning it, awareness, asking for help. Sometimes help's hard to take in the beginning, so you circle back and have another go and another go and then nothing. Sometimes it takes 7 or 8 times.
Several times, yes.
But the courage to admit it and the courage to then take it is big, because I see it in different walks of life where, no, I don't need anything. And then you go, they're never going to make this happen.
Yeah. And
whether it's in business or personal or health or relationship, it's sad they don't get the fulfillment and the joy they deserve or the success. So I really admire your courage to share that.
Oh, thank you.
So as we wrap this interview up, what are you doing now?
Well, so I ended up doing 5 shows last year, and the very last show that I did, I qualified for nationals. So it's just like any other sport. It not being an Olympic sport actually yet, there is conversation about it. The IOC is meeting with the different governing bodies within fitness and figure to discuss it being an Olympic sport, but I think it'll be probably a little bit of time before that happens, considering what's just happened with wrestling.
Yes, ouch.
Yeah.
I went to school with the brother of a wrestler,
right,
who did international,
yeah.
And so to see him was like, wow, this isn't just hot, sweaty bodies. There's a lot of skill and gritty determination.
For sure.
Not my kind of sport.
Yeah, it's very interesting sport. But so I did 5 shows. I qualified for nationals. So what that means is that I can now compete in the sport going for a professional card. What the difference between just like a regular competition or a show and you having your pro status is that it allows you to compete on the international circuit. And I have a passion for traveling, and so it's very much something that I'm passionate about still for sure. Personally, if the passion wasn't there, I definitely wouldn't be doing it.
Right.
But it also relates very much to my business. I've learned so much from my coaches about nutrition, how the female body works in ways that I didn't know before, simply because you learn it through the study of this sport. The female coach that I have, she's in the competitive professional piece of the industry for 15 years. And then her husband has been in nutrition for 32. He's actually considered a human biochemist, which is very different in comparison to nutritionists. So it's amazing.
I'd like to meet him. Well, her too, but I'd like to meet him one day.
Yeah, so it's very amazing the conversations that we have and the diet plans, or not diet, I don't want to call it diet plans, not like a diet plan, a nutrition plan, a meal plan that I have. Any questions that I have, it's great because he pushes me to go and do the research myself and then come back and we have a conversation about it, so I learn at the same time.
Ownership. Ooh, I love him. I really like him now.
So I'm that'll be something that I'll continue to work on, actually, is dabbling more in the nutritional education. I think eventually I would like to do a master's or some sort in health and physical wellness. But in the meantime, I'm still competing. So at the end of April, I'll travel to Winnipeg to compete in nationals. It'll be my first attempt at a pro card, and then I'll just keep going from there with respect to that sport. Now what I do is, like I said, I've been doing some traveling across the globe teaching different elements of health and fitness, but my mission, I guess, in life, to sum it up, Michael, is really just to touch, motivate, and inspire other people to get physical and get moving and take care of their body. It doesn't matter what it is that you want to do in life, as long as you're doing something that's fun and that you enjoy, and that you realize that you're put on this planet not for a short time but for a long time. And if we treat our bodies how we should treat them, with love and respect, then you're going to live that much more of a happy life. And so through being able to share some of my experiences, I hope that it will help other people along the way. But it's really not what I'm about. If there's some way that I can help people overcome or just get on the right track, then that's really what I want to do.
Well, you have a very powerful message, and you have the courage to share it. So I think that many big things will happen.
Thank you. And then I also offer online coaching and training, as well as in-person coaching and training when I am in Toronto. And like I said, nutrition is something. I mean, right now I can, I can advise and consult on nutrition, but I will be taking my official certifications that I can actually prescribe, nutrition programs.
So people will see your website at the bottom, and so they'll be able to find you.
Perfect.
So thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thank you.